Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. By now, everybody's seen the video of the inbreds in Alabama who attacked a black co-captain of a riverboat, with a half dozen of those degenerates, including some women, who attacked that man, and then how the community ran the racist off the dock and right out of town. These reprobates were using their little dinghy raft boat to try to stop a riverboat from being able to dock at its appointed position, and when the black co-captain of the riverboat told them that they had to move, they attacked him. Once again, you have white supremacy run amok. This was pure lawlessness. And the police weren't drawing their guns on these criminals, no pepper spray deployed. They weren't doing any of the typical stuff that they do to black folks who were just standing there. Now, was this incident racially motivated? Of course it was. The captain of the riverboat himself said that. And he's white. And he's not the only one. A 16-year-old who I believe is the white male who worked at the dock and ferried the co-captain to the dock where he was assaulted by that gang of racist thugs. The mother of that 16-year-old said you could hear the men yelling, "F that nigger," when the co-captain tried to move their boat. So it's not just black people saying that this was racially motivated. And this wasn't the first time the riverboats have had problems with these criminals. The riverboat captain said that the thugs who attacked the co-captain are part of a gang who occupy and impede the progress of vessels at the port, among other things, such as running off with one of the riverboat's golf carts. The captain of the riverboat said that in that instance, they were going to press charges against those criminals, but the police talked them out of it. Yeah, you heard that right. The riverboat crew wanted to press charges for their stolen golf cart, but it was the police who talked them out of it. These violent thugs were well known to the riverboat crews and the cops, but the police blocked previous attempts to stop them, and of course, because crime escalates, by allowing these criminals to get away with stealing people's property, they inevitably graduated to attacking people. And this happened before this latest incident of criminality. So the police are protecting these criminals. They're as guilty as the thugs who perpetrated this brawl. So for all the people asking, why would they try something like this? Why did they even think that they could do this? Who taught them that they could park a boat anywhere they want, even in a city-designated space for a riverboat, and that if anyone tells them that they have to move, they can gang up and beat that person up? Who taught them they could get away with that? American society did. White privilege did. The criminal class in America are used to being completely immune from the laws. You know already that if you ask who these reprobates know, that they've got at least a few people in law enforcement who they're directly related to. These people who have friends and family in the police are always the most lawless. When people are allowed to engage in lawless behavior, when they have a society that rewards lawless behavior and lets the criminals run wild, this is what you get. And of course they were running around, no shirts, no shoes, no manners. My most recent crime report about the two racists who menaced CFO Bennett in Florida was the same situation, except in that case, the victim was armed. And don't be surprised when the reprobates in this case try the same defense the racists who menaced CFO Bennett did, and try to claim that they were drunk. That's the catch-all excuse so many of these meth-head marauders use. Because under white supremacy, the practice is that any excuse is good enough, and just in case they can't come up with one, that's okay. The courts will provide one for them. Currently, these criminals are being charged with only misdemeanors. That's it, third-degree misdemeanors. They block a boat dock, attack a dock worker as a gang, set off a huge melee in which they endanger random citizens, and apparently the local authorities feel that, well, that's just a misdemeanor. That's all it rises to the level of. See, this society encourages violence for a certain demographic. It glorifies it. What those reprobates had going in their empty heads was probably that song, "Try That in a Small Town." For a lot of these white supremacists, that's some sort of Aryan anthem for them. Well, the inbred moron who made that song, he wasn't dumb enough to actually take his own advice. He would make a song about it, but that's as far as he was going to go. But the good old boys who the law never touches and never holds accountable, they think that they can do whatever they want, especially against black people. Well, they tried that in a small town, all right, and we all see how it turned out. It reminds me of the old Robin Harris joke. I'm from a small town called Fresh Off a Racist Behind, and you're all making me homesick. So it's no surprise that this rampant lawlessness was stopped by the law-abiding segment of society in Alabama, people who don't tolerate the rural rioting being brought to civilized communities, places where inbreeding and bestiality are still frowned upon. Heroes came out of the woodwork to stop those meth heads, including a 16-year-old who leapt into the water and swam across the dock to help that victim. That young man is rightly being compared to a superhero. We have to encourage and praise our young men because they are the warrior class. And this is why the white supremacists target black children, especially black boys, because the white supremacists are weak. And a 16-year-old black boy can knock out half a dozen of those white supremacist grown males. You watch the video. You see that young man, he just got through swimming a few laps, he got out of the water, grabbed one of those grown thugs and body slammed him like he didn't weigh anything. This kid wasn't playing around. Every white supremacist knows this. Every white supremacist cop in America understands that when a black teenager is standing in front of them, they're standing in front of their physical superior. We saw what happens when the white supremacists don't have their guns. Now you know why they want to make it where they can carry anywhere, anytime, because to them, that's the only hope that they have to be able to pull some racial ambush and walk away from it. But in this case, that young man didn't have to handle these thugs solo. It was a foot race to see who could start beating the brakes off those inbreds. The community came in and restored order, and the police couldn't save the perpetrators this time. The public did the right thing. They recognized that the police are part of the problem. The police have enabled and protected these criminals until the citizens finally had enough and took matters into their own hands, and they put a stop to it. The bad guys were put on their heels and made to not just back off, but to run for their lives, some of them so terrified they jumped in the water to escape. They hate taking an L, and this was a significant one. Those inbreds who attacked that man and started this melee have not all been arrested, and the police were talking about how they were waiting for at least one of them to turn themselves in. Now, if the perpetrators in this case had been black, would the police be simply sitting back and waiting to see when they get around to turning themselves in, or would they have the SWAT team knocking on their door? Now, you already know. And this is in a town that's supposed to have black leaders in it, but of course we all know that's not true. What they have are black sock puppets of white supremacy. But that brings me to another local moron down there, Stephen Reed, the so-called mayor of Montgomery. I spoke about him recently too in the last few days. Reed made headlines earlier this year when he was caught on an audio recording berating black voters and saying he didn't need black votes, all he needed was just enough white votes and just enough white money, too. So this is also part of what causes things like this to happen. The white supremacists understand when there's some bootlick in charge. They understand when that happens, and that emboldens them to carry out violence. The police down there, who have not rounded up all the inbreds who are responsible for this mayhem, have gone so far to have the nerve to say they want to question the man who was seen holding a chair. In fact, they're saying that they want him to turn himself in. I don't know why. He didn't break any laws and he wasn't doing anything wrong. In fact, he was trying to offer these violent Mayo morons some Southern hospitality. They were acting up, and he offered them a seat. You know, back in the day, Rosa Parks said, "You can't have my seat." Well, today that brother said, "You can have this one." Now we have to make sure we defend those who defend themselves. We cannot allow black people to be persecuted or intimidated by thugs with badges who always side with the white supremacists simply because black people exercise their right to self-defense or to come to the aid of a person being attacked. The same racist police who refused to ever arrest these guys in the past for their crimes, who refused to use force on the day that they carried out their violent assault, now they're deciding they suddenly feel tough when dealing with one of the law-abiding citizens who put a stop to that gang of hoodlums. We have to make sure we protect and help people, any black person who is not just protecting themselves, but also protecting others. And those sock puppets of white power down there cannot be allowed to attack a citizen for protecting other citizens. See, black people aren't supposed to be able to protect themselves if they're being attacked, especially by some white supremacist. That's one of the rules of the thugs with badges. When a black person is being attacked, we're just supposed to hope that some white person comes along and helps. But if a black person calls themselves actually defending themselves against some white supremacist, well, we got to charge the black person. We know that that's one of their rules because of how consistently they do it. And you can tell these little white supremacists were traumatized by what they saw. Because what they saw was the community getting on code and rising up to stop this white supremacist rampage. On Twitter the other day, some of the male morons were mad that people were glad to see law and order being restored. They were seeing black folks making sure that law and order prevailed that day. One of those online inbreds was in my comments, whining that the bad guys took that hard L and complaining, saying, "There was a white woman who got knocked over. Are you in favor of that?" She was no innocent bystander. She was also involved in the violence. She was part of it. But of course, these white supremacists are always trying to invent their own reality because they can't deal with the real one. So let what happened in Alabama be a message to the enemy that you can listen to all the country music songs you want telling you how tough you think you are. You can daydream about what you think you would do to black people. But consider yourselves put on notice. If you actually ever try anything like that in a small town or in the real world period, you'll find yourself trapped between the people and the deep blue sea. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Lance Catlett, Mark Anderson, Jasmine B., Mike Hughes, and Sherwin Wilcox. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.